Welcome to the Total Trader Trading Psychology Series Part 2, Practice Mindfulness to Overcome Erratic Trading. Hi, my name is Dr. Gary Dayton, and I am both a psychologist and a trader. I have created the Total Trader series to help traders develop the all-important mental and technical skills needed to trade successfully. In a trading class I recently attended, we were discussing the importance of trading psychology. The instructor, a well-known trader, asked whether or not the class participants agreed with this statement: trading is 90% psychology and 10% technical strategy. After some consideration, one of the participants responded, "Well, after you learn the technical strategy, trading is 100% psychological." I think this is very true. Many traders who come to work with me often have a good command of technical skills. They've developed a tool or method which has a strong winning edge, but they are unable to trade it successfully. They often say, "If only I could pull the trigger. If only I could stick to the setup. If only I could follow my plan." Why is it so hard to simply follow a trading plan? Why do we take trades outside of the plan and do it over and over again? Why do we fear the market, hesitate on pulling the trigger, overtrade, cut our winners short, and let losing trades run? Why do we engage in what I call erratic trading behaviors, even when we have tools with a strong winning edge? In this tutorial, I will answer some of these questions, discuss what drives these unwanted or erratic trading actions, and show you some of the state-of-the-art psychology that you can use to help yourself overcome unwanted behaviors and to help yourself develop your mental edge. Before we begin, please pause this video and take a moment to read the important disclaimer information provided here. You need to be aware that in using this material, I and my company are not investment advisors or broker-dealers, and we do not and cannot recommend securities for sale or purchase. The information provided in this product is for informational and educational purposes only. We do not assume responsibility for your investing and trading results. Because of the very high degree of risk involved in trading, you should always consult your licensed financial advisor and your tax advisor to determine the suitability of any investing or trading you may do. Also, please be aware that I am not offering psychotherapy through this tutorial. Although psychological concepts are explained, these concepts and explanations are provided for informational and educational purposes only. This tutorial is not offered nor is it provided as treatment for mental health ailments. If you are experiencing significant emotional distress, such as serious anxiety or depressive feelings, you are encouraged to seek professional help from a qualified mental health practitioner in your area. Now, let's take a look at what I'll be covering in this video tutorial. First, I will show you what is usually behind erratic trading and why traders engage in such behaviors. We'll also talk about how these actions harm traders and their trading. The erratic trading behaviors I'll discuss in this tutorial include hesitating or failure to pull the trigger, jumping into a trade without a plan, overtrading, and this includes using too much leverage, and the very, very common behaviors of cutting winning trades short and allowing losing trades to run. Secondly, we'll take a look at the common methods traders use to try and cope with these behaviors and why they are ineffective. Traders usually know that sometimes their actions are not helpful to their trading. What they do about it, however, is often ineffective. And in some cases, these common coping strategies can actually add to the situation, making it more difficult to overcome. We'll look at why this can happen. I will then introduce a cutting-edge psychological method, the method of practicing mindfulness. I will show you why the practice of mindfulness works and how mindfulness, when practiced and used consistently, can help traders reduce erratic behaviors and improve overall trading performance. I'll give you some guidelines on how to best put this into practice, and I'll then take you through a model that summarizes all that we've talked about. The model is presented in the form of a question you can ask yourself when you first notice that you are slipping into unwanted behavior. Finally, I'll give you guided mindfulness exercises for you to use, which are designed especially for traders to help overcome poor trading behavior, reduce stress, improve focus and concentration, and add to overall trading performance when practiced regularly. We'll start with failure to pull the trigger on sound trade setups. Failure to pull the trigger is a common erratic trading behavior. Why do traders hesitate to take the trade? Well, the simple answer is that the trader is in fear of the market. It's a bit more complex than this, and to help explain how fear of the market and failure to pull the trigger on good trade setups often develops, I'll use the story of a trader. This trader is actually a composite of many traders I've worked with, and we'll call her Novice. Now, Novice believed that trading is a good way to make lots of money. So, after attending a seminar, reading a couple of trading books, and setting up her trading account, Novice is optimistic, and she's quite eager to begin. So she starts trading right away. Now, Novice is just one of many traders whose enthusiasm actually becomes a detriment to their trading. Without adequate preparation and before learning about how markets really work and what a choice trade setup looks like, Novice is likely to be trading random patterns, and so naturally she has losses. Of course, no one likes losses and no one likes losing money. But without a solid trading plan and an understanding about how the markets work, most trades taken will have very little edge. And so it seems that nearly every time Novice puts on a trade, the trade goes wrong and she has a series of losses. What Novice is actually doing is conditioning herself to become fearful of the market. This is similar to the conditioning experiment Pavlov accomplished with his dogs. Do you remember Pavlov from your studies in high school or college? I know, it may have been a while, but it is important to understand. Let me refresh your memory. Pavlov noticed that his dogs would begin salivating when food was brought to them. Now, he wondered if he could get his dogs to salivate to other things unrelated to food. He wanted to see if he could influence their behavior, so he started to ring a bell just moments before the food arrived. He repeated this process of ringing the bell when bringing food. After a while, the dogs would salivate at the sound of the bell alone, even though no food was in sight. This is what we call conditioning, or pairing or linking one unrelated thing with another to influence behavior. The bell was linked with food, and soon the dog's behavior of salivation was triggered by the sound of the bell. One way that traders become fearful of the market is that by trading random patterns and having losses, they can link the stress associated with the loss to entering trades. In other words, like Pavlov teaching his dogs to link the sound of the bell to food, traders can teach themselves to link fear and stress to entering trades when trading random patterns. We can connect trading with fear and stress rather quickly because losses can produce strong emotional responses. They can be very painful, especially when repeated over and over. Now, no one likes to have fear and anxiety. They are uncomfortable emotions, and we are taught from an early age that these strong emotions should be avoided. So, we naturally want to get rid of these emotions. We want to escape them when we have them, or avoid them if we can. If we've come to fear entering a trade because of a series of painful losses, what's the natural response? Well, it's don't pull the trigger. Like Pavlov linking the bell with food to prompt salivation, Novice has linked trading with fear to prompt an avoidance response. Don't pull the trigger. It's an entirely understandable response to the situation that's been created. We simply don't pull the trigger, and immediately the fear and stress go away. Now, this is thoroughly frustrating for Novice because with a little more experience, she can now identify choice trade setups, but because of her prior conditioning, her response remains limited. She continues to avoid taking trades. Let's take a deeper look at this to see why she continues to avoid pulling the trigger. If we look carefully, we'll notice that Novice's focus and attention shifts from watching the market to her private thoughts and feelings when it comes time to take a trade. She may not be fully aware of this while it's happening, but if she steps back just a little and simply notices what her mind is telling her and how she feels, she is very likely to find that her attention is centered on scary thoughts and scary feelings about another loss. Her mind is recalling previous losses and all the pain of those losses because of the linking done earlier. Attention is not on the market or on the trade, but has gone inside to her internal state. This is important to understand because it's impossible to trade well when attention shifts from the market to our internal private experience. With attention on negative thoughts and feelings, she now looks to escape the stress. This is one important source of erratic trading. She and we, if we've had painful losing experiences that continue to influence our behavior, are taking action to address the stress we feel by avoiding pulling the trigger. We are not taking action in response to the market, but are addressing our internal experience of our thoughts and emotions. In this regard, we are really trading our thoughts and emotions, not market action and setups. With our attention stuck on our internal state of thoughts and feelings, whenever it comes time to pull the trigger, we never really learn important trading skills. Our focus is misplaced. This cycle can repeat itself over and over. We avoid the stress generated by what our mind is telling us and how our emotions make us feel by not pulling the trigger. We avoid entering trades to keep undesirable emotions at bay, not because it is the correct trading action. Of course, this is not trading well. Now, it's also important to understand that if you do have fear of the market and find it difficult to pull the trigger because of the losses you've experienced, realize that you are not flawed, and the likelihood is there is nothing defective about you. You are just stuck in an unhelpful pattern. Not broken, just stuck. And we'll talk about ways to become unstuck a little later. This is a model for many problematic or erratic trading behaviors, and overtrading is another example. Overtrading can be seen in a number of ways. For example, the market starts to rally and you aren't on board, so you jump in. Or maybe the market's been going up and up and up and you haven't been a participant, and now the market's heading higher again, and so you jump aboard. Or you read an advisory report and see a trade recommendation, so you take it. Or someone in a chat room says they've taken a trade, so you do too. Or you trade with too large of a position size. In each case, you are trading outside the scope of your trading plan, and again, the trades are likely to be based on random movements in the market or on random reasons for your trade that at the moment seem compelling, but are not well thought out trade setups that have an edge over time. So here's a way to think about overtrading. You see something in the market and it looks attractive. Perhaps you haven't had a trade all day and you're feeling frustrated because you've missed the morning move in your market. Or maybe you've had a loss or two and this is bothering you, so your mind might be telling you that, hey, you need to make that up. Get back to break even. Let's go here. Maybe even get a little profit. Then you're going to feel good. Okay, so here's the basic idea. You see something that appeals to you and your mind urges you to enter the market. You find yourself in a trade that is unplanned and doesn't meet your trading criteria. Just like the trader who fails to pull the trigger because of scary thoughts and feelings about another loss, in overtrading, the trade is taken because your mind and your emotions urge you to do so, not because it is a sound trade setup. And once in a trade, you feel relief from the urging of the mind and all the stress that that urging produces. But it's a poor trade, and it's likely to yield poor results, and in the end, create even more stress for you. In the short term, you relieve or escape the urgent feelings, but over the long haul, you are doing yourself and your trading a disservice. So, whether we are talking about failing to pull the trigger on one extreme or overtrading on the other, we see that they can stem from a similar cause, and that is responding to our internal state rather than maintaining a focus on and responding to what the market is telling us. I'd like to talk a little bit about how traders try to cope with these erratic behaviors. And there are numerous ways that traders try to cope with problematic trading behavior, and I'll talk about a few of the more common coping strategies and why they often fail to correct the situation. One is seeking additional information, and this can mean different things to different traders. For the trader who's overtrading, for example, he or she may read self-help books, study what others have written on greed, and put this information into a checklist of things not to do. Right? For the trader uncertain about how to trade the markets or lacking confidence in his own abilities, we may find him subscribing to various newsletters, following a few gurus, or maybe joining a couple of chat rooms to try to gain more information. For other traders, it might be the simple checking of the RSI, even though the MACD is already on the chart. In most of these cases, substantial effort is put into solving problematic trading behavior. However, all this effort does not usually solve the problem. It's like the story of the blindfolded man who was taken in a helicopter and set down onto a field. Now, the field has numerous deep holes, and walking along, our blindfolded man eventually falls into a hole. Oh, I almost forgot. He was given a bag before being left on the field. And so, taking off his blindfold, he sees he's stuck in a hole, and so he opens the bag. Inside, he finds a tool. It's a shovel. So he starts digging, trying to dig himself out of the hole. Of course, this is not very constructive because he is only digging himself in deeper and deeper. Now, I come along and I look down from above at this man digging away. And I shout down to him and I say, "Hey, do you need any help down there?" He looks up and he says, "Yeah, do you have a bigger shovel?" The point of this little story is that most traders are trying to solve problematic trading behaviors with the wrong tools. It usually isn't about more information. Another trap many traders face is the frustrating tendency to cut winners short. By cutting winners short, I mean getting out of a trade with a small profit and not allowing the trade to mature into its full profit potential. Cutting winners short is both an attempt to cope with a problem and an erratic trading behavior all rolled up into one. Let's take a look at what happens. Usually, a trader gets into a well-planned trade. It's a nice setup that meets all the criteria of a trade with an edge. And the trade begins to show a profit. At this point, however, the trader's mind begins to interpret the uncertainty of price. especially if price is languishing or backs up a little. Now, it's helpful to recognize that we have a tendency to become slightly negative in uncertain situations, and trading is certainly a situation that has an uncertain outcome. Our mood tends to sour a bit, and we become a little defensive. It's a natural response. We're simply looking to avoid an adverse situation, so we become a little pessimistic, and we naturally look to protect ourselves. Now, if we've had a few losses in the past and experienced the pain of those losses, then the mind is likely recalling these. This can amplify the natural pessimistic tendency we have in uncertain situations like a trade. In any event, the mind begins urging an exit from the trade. If you listen, you might hear your mind say something like, "Hey, you better get out now with this profit. You don't want to see this trade turn into a loser, and you certainly don't want to have another loss." So, when we are in a trade and we are viewing the uncertainty of how this trade will work out as potentially negative, it can certainly produce stress in the forms of muscle tension, anxiety, maybe your stomach is queasy or palms are sweaty, you got a racing heart, and the emotion too, apprehension, fear, all the sensations and feelings that are associated with stress. And all the while, the mind is racing away. It's not quiet, but it's telling us how this trade is going to turn into a loss, and how this loss is very bad, and how we don't want that, and so on and so on. Of course, none of this feels good. And so what do we want to do when we feel all of this stress? We want to get rid of it. We want to escape it. We have a strong urge to cut and run with a small profit because our mind is saying we're going to have a loss, and it's bringing up negative feelings. And the mind is probably rationalizing its argument, saying, "Hey, a small profit is better than a loss, so let's get out of here now." So we exit the trade with a little profit. And what happens almost immediately? Our tension drains, our stress melts away, the fearful emotions and the anxiety subsides, and we get relief from our internal state. Now, this is highly reinforcing. We have now learned a very effective method for getting rid of our stress. All we need to do is get out of winning trades quickly, and the stress is gone. It's an almost certain response the next time we enter a trade and feel stress. Now, note again that once again, we are taking action to escape unpleasant feelings and not taking action because it makes sense for the trade. Just like the trader who avoids taking a trade because of fear, and just like the trader struggling with overtrading who takes an unplanned trade because his or her mind and emotion is urging entry, the trader who cuts winners short is responding to their emotions and what their mind is telling them. The major point is that we are taking trading actions to address our emotions and to address what the mind is telling us, not to address what the market is revealing or what is best for the trade. This distinction is important to understand. It sets us up for a vicious cycle. In cutting winners short, we enter a trade, feel stress, escape, and gain temporary relief from our mind and our emotions. We never really learn how to handle the stress, and we never really learn how to hold on to winning trades. But we do get relief from our anxiety and stress until the next trade. Because we haven't learned how to handle the stress, and because we haven't learned how to hold on to a winning trade, we again become stressed, and we have only one effective response, which isn't really effective, but it's escape. It can continue like this until we either burn out, blow up our account, or find a way to exit the fruitless cycle. And we'll talk about how to exit this cycle in a little while. Now, Another way that traders try to cope with these behaviors is to suppress or try to control the unwanted thoughts and feelings. If I don't want to feel anxiety or I don't want to have a scary thought, suppressing it or controlling it or getting rid of it somehow seems to be a good solution. But this is really just looking for a bigger shovel to dig yourself out of a hole. And why do I say this? Well, first of all, attempting to suppress thoughts only serves to take our mind off the trading task at hand. If we are trying to suppress or control what the mind is telling us, our attention is focused on our thoughts. Once again, we are shifting attention from trading and towards preoccupation with our internal experiences. Here's another important reason why trying to control and suppress thoughts is like looking for a bigger shovel. Recent cutting-edge research in psychology is showing that very often our attempts to control thoughts and feelings actually have just the opposite effect of what we intend. When you say, I don't want to have that thought or I don't want to have that feeling anymore, the mind can take this on as sort of a mission and actually starts to scan for those thoughts and feelings. As soon as it recognizes even the subtlest resemblance of an unwanted thought or feeling, it brings them right up to our attention. So even if we don't want them, we have them. Trying to suppress thoughts and feelings can actually have an opposite, what we call paradoxical effect, meaning it can make them worse. Albert Einstein once observed that we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that caused the problem. And this is very true when dealing with emotions and trading. A different kind of thinking is needed to help traders understand that feeling unwanted emotion does not necessarily predict losing trades. Traders also need to recognize that what the mind says may not always be reality. This is really important, so I'll say it again. Traders also need to recognize that what the mind says to them may not always be reality. Sometimes we need to pull back from our thoughts and not always buy into them. A different way of thinking is needed, and it isn't about controlling unpleasant thoughts and feelings. You already know from your own experience that trying to control thoughts and emotions doesn't work. Do you know anyone who is able to control their thoughts and feelings? I don't. And I don't expect to ever meet anyone who can. The best performers in any field, athletes, concert musicians, surgeons, lawyers, and traders, all have doubts and fears and unwanted thoughts and feelings. We wouldn't be human without them. The struggle to not have distress, to try and control the thoughts and feelings or try to avoid or get rid of them, this actually causes more distress and, as we've been discussing, contributes to, if not causes, erratic trading behaviors. As we struggle to suppress or avoid internal states of thoughts and feelings, we wind up avoiding pulling the trigger, overtrading and cutting winners short, among other problem trading behaviors. The more we struggle with thoughts and feelings, the more we are likely to limit our actions to a narrow repertoire with little flexibility. And most of the time, we are responding to our thoughts and emotions in an almost automatic, unhelpful way, rather than responding to the market. We become trapped. The suggestion I have for you is a different way of thinking. It's to have the unpleasant thoughts and feelings, but just have a different relationship with them. Here's something highly relevant to what we are discussing. A study of elite athletes found that they too had fear and unwanted emotions. Despite the high level of their game, they too had all the unwanted thoughts and all the symptoms of stress that we as traders feel. They had them, but they had a different relationship with them that enabled them to perform at a high level while having the unwanted thoughts and feelings. Here's a quote from Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers ever. He acknowledges having the stress in major tournaments. Here's what he says. The challenge is hitting good golf shots when you have to do it when the nerves are fluttering, the heart pounding, the palms sweating. That's the thrill. Interesting, isn't it? Tiger Woods, maybe the greatest golfer ever, or certainly one of the better ones, has these experiences, these internal experiences while playing his game. Do you remember in March of 2009, the jet that was landed in the Hudson River after just taking off from the New York airport? That was quite a feat. Well, a few days later, the TV host Katie Couric interviewed the pilot, Captain Sullenberger, about what it was like. Now imagine for a moment what it must have been like to be flying that aircraft about to fall out of the sky, and the only option was to land it in a river. In the interview, Ms. Couric asked him if he was worried about the lives of the 100+ passengers he held in his hands. Captain Sullenberger said, "No, I assumed others in the flight crew were taking care of the passengers." She then asked, "Well, were you praying?" And he said, "No, I figured others were doing that too." Captain Sullenberger then went on to say, "The physiological reaction to this was strong, and I had to force myself to use my training." Now, Captain Sullenberger is a man of few words, but he says the physiological reaction was strong, meaning he felt the enormous stress, not simply of fear, but likely terror. And he went on to say that he had that reaction, but turned his attention to his training. In other words, focusing on the tasks he needed to accomplish to land that plane, checking the airspeed, leveling the wings, adjusting the attitude of the descent, and whatever else was necessary at that time. Note that neither Tiger Woods nor, in this extreme example, Captain Sullenberger, are able to remove unwanted thoughts and feelings. And this is what the research shows as well. Elite athletes and other performers aren't able to remove uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, but they are able to remove the effects of thoughts and feelings from their performance. And that will be our goal too. This is all about being focused on the trading task at hand, rather than focused on the experiences we are having with our internal state. This is an important distinction, and in a few moments it's going to lead us into a discussion about being in the zone. But we'll get there in a moment. But first, I want to talk about self-focus versus task focus. We want to be focused on the market and the trade and the tasks needed to identify sound setups, the entries, placing protective stops, managing the trade, and then exiting when appropriate, just like Captain Sullenberger in landing the plane in the Hudson River, focusing on the things that needed to be done, rather than on the physiological response that he was having. Now, as we've already seen, when we're focused on our thoughts and feelings and our internal state, our attention is centered on ourselves. And this leads to negative performance. We've already discussed that when we're self-focused, meaning focused on our internal state of thoughts and feelings, when we're self-focused, we're more likely to engage in erratic trading behaviors. When we can center our attention on the trading tasks, we improve the likelihood of positive performance. When we struggle with our thoughts and feelings and try to control them, to feel better or to think differently or to avoid the uncomfortable feelings and unwanted thoughts, our trading suffers. Whenever we try to get rid of unwanted thoughts and feelings, our performance is adversely affected. When we can maintain a focus on the task and not redirect our attention to our internal state or become distracted by our internal events or outside events as well, we place ourselves into a position to enter what many refer to as being in the zone or the zone of optimal performance. We certainly can't be in the zone when we're focused on things other than what is most important to the trade. So how do we get there? Mindfulness and making the choice to stay focused on the task at hand are related to the zone and peak performance. Mindfulness especially helps the trader maintain attention and poise without having to change thoughts and feelings or control them in any way. Through the practice of mindfulness, we can come to understand that what the mind and the body tell us are simply transient, short-lived experiences that come and go all the time. But before we get to how you can begin to lessen and reduce the effects of these thoughts and feelings from your trading through mindfulness, I want to go a little deeper and talk with you about the important psychological principle of diffusion. Knowing about this principle can help you better understand the material that is yet to come. And we'll start with its opposite, fusion. Fusion. What's fusion? Fusion occurs when we see and believe what our mind is telling us as the absolute truth or reality about a situation. We believe what the mind tells us so much that we feel obligated or compelled to respond. Although it's not really true, we feel that we have to respond in the way we do because the thoughts and feelings that we are having about a situation appear so true. Let's take a couple of examples to illustrate this. Let's go outside of trading for a moment. Have you ever had this experience? You're late for a very important meeting. Maybe it's a presentation you are giving or an important session with your boss or any appointment that is significant for you. So you are late, and in your mind, you can hear yourself making comments to hurry up and rush. Let's get to this meeting. Come on, let's go. Your mind might even start to project what I call the parade of horribles, the things your mind conjures up about the situation. For example, the person you're going to meet is going to be very upset because you're late. Being late will reflect poorly on you. Whatever it is you wanted to achieve from this meeting won't happen now because you're late, and so on and so on. The mind just goes on, doesn't it? Without stop, and you become more and more worked up about being late. Then you get to your appointment and find out either the person is also late or nobody cares. What your mind created, all the tension and the chastising and the projection of the parade of horribles that seemed so true a moment ago is now seen to be completely false. We've all had experiences like this and somehow survived them, though when you are in the throes of all the turmoil the mind generates, we tend to lock out more flexible thought. And notice this, the next time we're late, what happens? We forget about this experience, that no one cares, and the mind starts the process all over again, doesn't it? This is essentially what happens when we get into a trade. It goes in our favor, but then we start to doubt the trade and fear it coming back on us and giving us a losing trade. We fuse with what the mind tells us, and we feel compelled to act and cut our winning trade short. The same is true for overtrading. The market moves, your mind begins projecting what will happen next, and sees you aren't in the trade. You fuse, your mind is urging, and so you jump into the trade. It's often at the extreme of price. I want to take a moment, if you're willing, to do a short exercise and show you just how powerful and also how natural fusion is. So if you're willing, close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath in. And then let it out. And imagine for a moment that I'm standing in front of you in the room you are in. And in my hand, I have a small yellow fruit. This small yellow fruit is very ripe. It was just picked from the tree. You can see how ripe it is. And if you were thinking that in my hand I held a lemon, you would be correct. It's a very ripe lemon. So ripe, in fact, that when I place the lemon on the cutting board in front of me and I take my knife and cut the lemon in half, the juice spills out all over the cutting board. It's so ripe you can even smell the pleasant scent of lemon from where you sit. Now I pick up one half of the lemon and hold it up high over your head. Now go with me on this. Open your mouth, and as you do, I squeeze that lemon and the juice runs right into your mouth, hitting your tongue, and you can immediately taste the lemon. Now open your eyes. Could you smell the lemon? Could you taste it? Did you pucker up? Did you begin to salivate? Most people will answer yes to one or more of these questions. This is an example of fusion. There was no lemon. I'm not in the room you are in. No lemon juice was poured into your mouth, yet you could probably see the lemon in your mind's eye, could smell its scent, and your mouth might even have begun to water or pucker. You were fused with what I and your mind was telling you, so much so that you even had physiological response, even though it wasn't the truth and it wasn't reality. Fusion. You can see how powerful the mind is. When we treat our thoughts and feelings as if they are accurate reflections of reality, then, like the missed meeting or the lemon, they become pretty compelling. Take, for example, this thought. If I enter this trade, I will have a loser. When we are fused with this thought, we can probably even feel tension in our body and other uncomfortable sensations and emotions. What we want to do is gain a little distance on our thoughts. We want to step back from them a bit and be able to look at them as thoughts rather than look through them as the truth. In other words, we want to defuse from them. To illustrate, I'd like you to take your hands, hold them out in front of you, and interlace the fingers, leaving enough space between the fingers so that there's light there and you can look through that space. Now, bring your hands in front of your eyes. This is what fusion is like. Our fingers are our thoughts, and we are looking at the world through our thoughts, through the fingers, looking through the spaces between the fingers. It really colors the world, doesn't it? Now, pantomime holding your thoughts in one hand, and bring that hand with your thoughts out in front of you and off to the side a little, but at arm's length. Hold your hand with your thoughts out at arm's length. This is diffusion. We aren't looking through our thoughts. We're not looking through what the mind is saying to us. We're looking at them. Let's go back to our example. If I stay in this trade, I'll have a loser. If we view this thought simply as a thought, we then gain some distance from it. For example, I'm having the thought that if I stay in this trade, I'll have a loser. Different, isn't it? We are holding this thought at arm's length by treating it as a thought and not as reality. We're beginning the process of defusing from what our mind is telling us and believing our mind as if it's telling us reality. Why is this so important? Well, it's because our thoughts take on the form of rules, silent, unexamined rules that guide and affect our actions. So if we have the thought, if I stay in this trade, I'll have a loser, what do we logically do? We cut the trade short. Again, we are believing what our mind is telling us as reality rather than letting the market tell us its truth. We take this as a rule, and then it affects our actions and behaviors. Have you ever had this experience? You enter a trade and it starts producing a profit. All is well and good until your mind starts telling you to close the trade. Otherwise, you risk turning this modestly profitable trade into a loser. Now, believing your mind, you close out the trade, and then the market runs much farther in your direction. What's your mind saying to you now? If it's like many traders, it's chastising you and criticizing you for getting out too early, even though it just told you moments ago to do exactly that. And now, once again, we believe our minds as reality and now feel bad because we should have stayed in. But which mind was right here? Was it the mind that told us to get out of the profitable trade because it feared a loss? Or is it the mind that chastises us now for getting out too soon? Unfortunately, most traders believe both minds. Not only do they cut the winner short, but then they feel bad for doing exactly what the mind told them to do. You can't win, can you? Well, not if you are listening to what your mind is saying as if it were the truth. This is fusion, believing what our minds are saying as if it were reality. You can see that it will often get us to act against our own best interests, especially in trading. Now, I hope I've made the point clearly. It's not that our mind is an enemy, never to be trusted. Most of the time, our minds work in our favor and help us to negotiate our environment pretty well. But when it comes to emotions and situations of uncertainty, which will easily generate a lot of mental chatter and a lot of unwanted emotions, it's important to step back and become more observant. It's important to step back and look at rather than through what our mind is telling us. This is diffusion. I hope I've made the point clearly. It's not that our mind is an enemy never to be trusted. Most of the time, our minds work in our favor and help us to negotiate our environment. When it comes to emotions in situation of uncertainty, which will easily generate a lot of mental chatter and unwanted emotions, however, it's important to step back and to become more observant. This is diffusion. We want to diffuse from what our mind is telling us. It's not trying to eliminate or stop thoughts and feelings. That's impossible. But it is stepping back from them, getting some distance from them, and not buying into everything the mind says as if it were the truth. Diffusing simply means being able to see our thoughts and feelings for exactly what they are, and not necessarily reflecting reality. So how do we start to decenter from what the mind is saying, and how do we start to look at thoughts and feelings for what they are, just as passing internal events that have no enduring significance? and not as if they are reflecting truth and reality. Mindfulness is one very important and useful way to diffuse. Mindfulness promotes a greater awareness of what the mind tells us as it occurs and helps us to begin to decenter from what the mind as well as what our emotions are telling us. Mindfulness helps us to begin to adopt Einstein's notion of thinking differently about the challenges we have, rather than to be thinking in the same old way, and that likely got us into the difficulty to begin with. And, as we've seen, this same old way of thinking works against us because it tends to sustain and keep that difficulty going. So mindfulness promotes a greater awareness of what the mind is telling us as it occurs. We begin to detach from the constant stream of mental thoughts. We begin to see our thoughts just as a stream of natural commentary offered by the mind, but not necessarily reality. Through the practice of mindfulness, we begin to part from our eyes the veil that the mind cloaks our experiences in. Remember the little exercise we did with your fingers laced in front of your face versus looking at your thoughts at arm's length? Well, that's what mindfulness helps us to do. It doesn't change our thoughts, and this is important. We still have the same thoughts. The change doesn't lie in thoughts and feelings, but in how we relate to them. This is the key. Mindfulness, with practice, helps us to change our trading actions by helping us to change how we relate to our thoughts. We learn to view the mental scenery with detachment and not as a reflection of reality. When what our mind is telling us is viewed as simply a series of thoughts and words, we can view them with interest and not necessarily feel compelled to act on them. From this vantage point, we can see reality more clearly. Rather than become distracted by our thoughts and feelings, we can diffuse and focus our attention on the actions that are most important to us as traders and our trades, or what I call the trading task at hand. So being able, through mindfulness, to step back and diffuse from what the mind is telling us gives us the mental space to make a committed choice to focus on the trading task at hand. We are now in a better position to choose to pull the trigger, refrain from an impulsive trade, or to hold on to that winner a little longer. Until we learn to diffuse and detach from what the mind is telling us, it is going to be difficult not to respond to all the mental chatter because, as we've seen, we become lost in it. If we were to take a fish out of the lake or a river, and if that fish could talk, and we were to ask that fish what it was like being in water all the time, it wouldn't know how to respond. Our thoughts are like water. We've swum in them from an early age. Most of us have never really looked at them as separate from ourselves, but they are. Once we begin to realize that the mental scenery is just that, scenery, and not a true reflection of reality, we no longer have to see the world through our thoughts as if they were tinted glasses, coloring everything we see, yet thinking we are seeing clearly. Now, this is not necessarily easy because our thoughts and our feelings can come very quickly, especially the ones we've been conditioned to believe. They can come so quickly, in fact, we call them automatic thoughts. We have to take special care to begin noticing them, and this takes effort. As I said earlier, it may not be an easy thing to do, but it is certainly not impossible either. It does take practice, however. So again, mindfulness promotes a greater awareness of what the mind is saying and provides that important space for us to choose between following those temporary thoughts and what matters most for a given trade and also for ourselves as traders over the long haul. We always have that choice. When in a trade, for example, and the mental chatter begins urging you to take a quick profit, when self-aware and mindful, you can recognize that thought as just a thought, and that following your plan for this trade is more important and what matters more to you as a trader than following your thoughts. You are now in a better position to make a committed choice to staying with your plan while in this trade. When I say that mindfulness helps you make a committed choice that matters more to you as a trader, I'm speaking about your development as a trader and learning to trade your plan rather than to be buffeted about like a rudderless ship at sea in a storm. In this regard, I'm often reminded of the words of David Sklansky, the great writer on professional poker and probability play. I've rephrased his words a bit for trading, but the meaning for traders is identical and significant. Sklansky says, "For any trade made consistent with your trading plan, where odds are in your favor, know you've achieved something significant, regardless whether you win or lose on the trade. Conversely, anytime you make a trade outside the scope of your trading plan, where odds are not in your favor, know you have lost something significant, regardless whether you win or lose on the trade." If you're struggling with your mind, and this is causing you to make poor trading actions, with the practice of mindfulness, you can begin to make the committed choice Sklansky so eloquently talks about. Let's look more closely at how mindfulness works and how you can use it to your advantage. The regular practice of mindfulness, and please be aware that it does take practice. Anything worthwhile, especially changing our behavior, takes practice. The more you practice mindfulness, the better you get at it, and the more you will be able to handle your responses to situations that are now difficult for you. Okay, with practice of mindfulness, you begin to develop greater self-awareness. You become aware that thoughts are just thoughts and often incorrect. You become aware that feelings are just feelings and pass through us soon enough. And you begin to recognize that you are truly different from your thoughts and from your feelings. You aren't defined by them, and these don't have to influence either your actions or your future. You begin to see and recognize your tendencies and patterns. And by tendencies and patterns, I'm talking about how you respond not just in action, but also in thought and feeling to given situations. You will see this first in hindsight or after the fact, and gradually in real time. Developing this level of self-awareness begins to break down the automatic process of thoughts and feelings. You begin to stop looking through your thoughts and begin to recognize that your thoughts and their associated feelings just happen and don't really reflect reality. You start to decenter from what the mind is telling you. You stand apart from your thoughts and feelings. And it's this posture that mindfulness offers that allows us to make an important choice. We're now in a position to either choose to respond to our unwanted thoughts and uncomfortable feelings, or shift our attention to what is most important to us in a given trade and for us long-term as traders. In other words, the relationship with our thoughts and feelings has changed. Through mindfulness, we are no longer compelled to act in accordance with what the mind is telling us. We can shift our attention and focus back to the task at hand and onto what the market is telling us. That is, we can focus on what is unfolding on the charts and make higher quality trading decisions. Doing this obviously increases the likelihood of much more consistent and successful trading. At the end of the video, I've included 2 mindfulness exercises you can use. These are guided centering exercises that can help you see your thoughts as simply thoughts. One is a short guided centering session. You should start with this one or use it when time is limited. The other is a longer session. It's important to practice daily. You don't need to spend a lot of time in formal mindfulness practice. 10 or 20 minutes a day is quite fine. But daily practice is important. This is a skill, a mental skill. Like any skill, it takes practice, effort, and time to develop. You need to work at it and develop it. If, for example, we wanted to become fit, we might join a gym. Well, we don't just step through the door, walk into the gym and say, "Hey, I'm fit." It's the same with mindfulness. We can't just listen to this video and say, "Hey, I'm mindful." Do the work. Practice daily. Over time, you may find that like the long-term runner, it's hard to go a day without practice. And it's not just in formal practice that you can be mindful. The good news is you can do it pretty much anywhere. When you're writing in your trading journal and you find your mind drifting, just notice your thoughts and bring your focus back to the task at hand. The same with preparing for the trading day. As soon as you recognize that your mind is wandering, bring it back to what's most important to you. Your mind might say to you, for example, that you would rather watch television rather than study your charts and prepare for trading the next day. It might give you all kinds of excuses, such as you're tired, you worked hard today, you need a day off, and so on. Just note these comments and turn your attention back to the trading task at hand. There's no need to fight them, no need to try to eliminate them, no need to struggle. Just mindfully refocus your attention. It's the same with reviewing charts. And how about in everyday life? You don't need to practice this only in trading situations. Everyday situations outside of trading also offer opportunities for mindfulness practice. For example, let's say you're in a conversation with someone and you notice that your mind starts to wander. Maybe it's thinking about how to respond to what this person is saying, a typical occurrence. Simply and gently remind yourself to become mindful and turn your attention back to what your counterpart is saying. If you're in the grocery line waiting to check out and begin to become impatient thinking about all you have to do that day, notice this and gently bring your mind back to the present moment. When in a trade, notice what your mind is telling you. Notice it is likely to be in the past, maybe reviewing an old loss, or in the future, perhaps predicting a calamity. Just notice and gently bring your attention back to the chart and the tasks of managing your trade. This is mindfulness in trading. In virtually any situation, when your mind begins to wander, just note that your thoughts are wandering and bring your attention back to the task at hand, whatever that may be. This is mindfulness. It's simple, and the more you practice it, the more skilled at mindfulness you become, and the more powerful it becomes as well. Using the process of mindfulness can help you develop flexibility in your trading performance. If you are trading on emotions and cutting your winners short, for example, or overtrading or hesitating on pulling the trigger, you are really responding to your thoughts and feelings and not responding to the market, as we have been discussing. Your response and your ability to respond is narrowed. You have a limited repertoire, so to speak. You get into a trade, get scared, and cut the winner short. Through mindfulness, we want to help ourselves expand our range of responses. Sometimes it will be important to exit a trade before we planned. But at other times, we want the flexibility to be able to stay in that trade and follow it to its logical and hopefully profitable conclusion. The graphic on your screen is a model to help you with this process. Starting at 1 at the bottom of the hexagon, be self-aware. Recognize that there's a difference between you and the things that you struggle with. The struggles don't define you. You're not a bad trader. just a trader who currently has some unhelpful habits. Recognize this difference and engage that part of you that can observe your thoughts and your emotions and your bodily sensations. Stand a bit apart from yourself, mindfully observe, and ask yourself, am I willing to be open to all of my thoughts and feelings, keeping in mind that any attempt to control or struggle with them hasn't worked for you and isn't likely to work in the future? Drop the struggle with trying to control your thoughts and feelings and make room for them. Just let them occur. Notice what your mind is telling you mindfully with a little distance, not looking through your thoughts and allowing them to influence your behavior, but instead mindfully recognizing that your mind is saying what your mind is saying to you for what it is, a series of thoughts and feelings, not necessarily reality, and not something you necessarily need to feel compelled to act on if it runs contrary to your trading goals. And take action. This is important. Take action in the direction of what matters to you most, both as a trader and for this particular trade. Take a step, even a very small step, towards the proper trade management, rather than responding to the noise of your mind and your feelings. Do what is best for you and what's best for your trade, not what is best for your mind and your fleeting emotions. And do it now, right now, not later, not tomorrow, not in the next trade, but now, in this moment, in this trade, and in each present moment. Mindfulness helps to give you the choice between struggling and taking valued action. The struggle we all know. It's tightening your emotions, limiting your trading, becoming incredibly frustrated and getting poor results. Valued actions are the actions of sound trading. Good trade management, setting stops, entering trades without hesitation, exiting poor trades immediately when you clearly recognize that the trade is wrong. It's a very good idea to spend some time thinking about valued trading actions. You can imagine a top trader and think about how he or she would act from planning a trade, taking it, managing it, and finally exiting the trade. List out these actions as valued trading behaviors you want to pursue rather than taking trading actions in the service of trying to control and eliminate unwanted thoughts and feelings. Mindfulness helps give you the mental space to be able to make a choice in how you respond. You can either continue to struggle with your thoughts and feelings, leading to inconsistent trading and what I would call continued suffering, or you can choose valued trading actions, eventually leading to consistent trading and vitality. When you're mindful, you always have a choice. There are other benefits to mindfulness you will begin to notice after some practice. Your focus and concentration are likely to improve. What may have sidetracked you earlier become less distracting. This is good news for traders because a key mental skill in trading is the ability to concentrate and focus on the charts. With better concentration, you are likely to see things you may have missed before. Decision-making is likely to improve. Clarity of thought leads to better quality decisions. No question about it. With mindfulness, it also promotes staying in the present moment. Much of our lives are lived in the past and in the future. And this is another unfortunate byproduct of the mind. Mindfulness keeps us in the here and in the now. It keeps us with a present moment focus. The regular practice of mindfulness has been demonstrated to relieve stress. This is significant and certainly of very good news to traders. So, the benefits of mindfulness are significant and substantial. In this video tutorial, we have reviewed some of the common erratic behaviors that affect traders. Not only do these create an environment of inconsistent trading, but they tend to reinforce and sustain themselves over and over again. Traders can become easily trapped in a cycle of problematic trading that's difficult to exit. Mindfulness and diffusion are both on the forefront of modern psychology, and both can be very helpful to traders in overcoming problematic trading behaviors. Think carefully about the kinds of things you have done to try to deal with problem behaviors. How many have really worked? How many times have you promised yourself you won't do that again? And how many times has that worked? Trying to control our thoughts and our feelings is not the answer. It only brings us more of the same. We only struggle and continue the struggle. Stepping outside the struggle and letting go is one method that does work. Mindfulness allows us to be aware of ourselves, stand apart from our thoughts and feelings, and recognize that what the mind and our feelings say to us are not always accurate reflections of reality. It is only then that we can make the choice to do what matters for ourselves as traders and for our trades by focusing on the trading task at hand rather than on our internal experiences of thoughts and feelings. It is this ability to mindfully attend to the task at hand that allows us to approach what others have called being in the zone. Now, mindfulness does take effort to develop. There's no doubt about that. It's a skill, and consistent practice alone will help you develop that skill. I've given you several examples on how and where you can practice mindfulness in both trading and in everyday life. If you practice mindfulness both formally and informally, as I have suggested, you will put yourself in the best position to benefit from a mindful approach to trading when it comes time to pull the trigger or while in a trade when it matters most. In this video tutorial, I've given you guidelines for practicing mindfulness and also guided mindfulness exercises for you that you can use in informal practice. These exercises follow the video. I've also given you a model for trading performance flexibility. In other words, for developing and expanding a flexible repertoire of responses to the market as the market is unfolding. This model is framed in the form of a question that you can ask yourself when you feel yourself about to slip into an erratic trading behavior. Print it out and leave it on your desktop. It'll be of help to you, as it has been to many traders. Thank you again for purchasing and listening to my Total Trader Trading Psychology chapter on practicing mindfulness to overcome erratic trading. It's been a real pleasure for me to be able to share my understanding and practice with you through this video. I wish you the greatest success in applying the material I've presented. Good trading, and trade mindfully. Before beginning your mindfulness practice, I'd like to say a brief word about the mindfulness exercises that follow, and mindfulness in general. The main task of these exercises are to maintain focus and concentration. You will no doubt find your mind wandering off the task. You need not be concerned about this, and please do not become frustrated about it. This is simply what minds do. You also need not struggle with your wandering mind. Struggle takes you right out of mindfulness. Instead, each time you note your mind drifting, acknowledge it and gently bring your focus back to the point of concentration. That's all there is to it. There's really nothing more. That's the only goal in mindfulness as being practiced here. Simply to bring your mind back into focus each and every time it wanders off. As your mind wanders, it is helpful to note this tendency and become curious about it. This attitude will serve you well in mindfulness practice. Your mind will likely throw up all kinds of things, from wanting to think about what you have to do later today to thoughts like, gee, I wonder what we'll have for dinner. When you notice the thoughts, you can simply say to yourself, a thought, and then gently bring your mind back to the task at hand. Through this form of mindfulness practice, you are in essence training your mind to return quickly from its wandering travels back to the task at hand. You will quickly learn on a deeper level than many how the mind operates. You will learn that the mind hardly ever stops, and it's always commenting about something. Through mindfulness practice, you will also develop an important understanding about the mind and the content it generates. And that is that what the mind says to you is not always an accurate reflection of reality. One mindfulness expert has described the mind as a puppy that flits from here to there and over to there and back to here with little rhyme or reason to its flitting to and fro. Your job in mindfulness is to proverbially tie that puppy to a post by repeatedly bringing your mind back to the point of focus.